Every time BTS announces a world tour, I always notice the same thing. And honestly, it's not about the stage concept or the set list. What really unsettles me is the list of countries. Because if you slow down and really look at it, the pattern barely changes. Certain countries keep showing up, almost as if they were locked in from the very beginning. At this point, I personally start to wonder, is this purely a business decision, or is there an emotional connection that's simply too deep to let go? Because a BTS world tour is not just a musical journey, it's a map of global influence. They don't arrive in a country by accident. There's history, there's public response, there's collective memory, and there's also industry pressure that never shows on the surface. What people rarely talk about is how these country choices quietly decide who feels acknowledged and who is left waiting, year after year. And to be honest, as an observer, I sometimes feel amazed and sometimes deeply uneasy watching it all unfold. Because behind the cheers of ARMY, there are strategic decisions being made with a very cold precision. So based on all of those observations, here is the list of countries that, in my view, always become BTS's top priorities during a world tour. We're starting with the ones that are most often overlooked and moving straight into the top list. Number 7, Thailand. Thailand has quietly but consistently positioned itself as one of BTS's most reliable priorities in Southeast Asia. And the more I think about it, the less this feels accidental. Bangkok, in particular, functions like a regional magnet every time BTS announces a tour stop there. Fans don't just come from within Thailand, they flood in from Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Vietnam, even farther corners of Asia, turning one concert into a multinational convergence. What's rarely discussed is how this transforms Thailand from a simple tour stop into a strategic emotional hub. From a logistical standpoint, Thailand offers stability, large capacity venues, experienced concert organizers, and a government and entertainment ecosystem that understands how to handle massive international events without chaos. But if it were only about infrastructure, other countries could easily replace it. This is where, in my opinion, the emotional equation comes in. Thai fans have a reputation for being loud, expressive, and intensely loyal, not just online, but physically present, screaming every lyric, every name, every cue. BTS doesn't just perform in Thailand, they are received there with a kind of raw enthusiasm that feels unfiltered, almost primal. And I personally think artists feel that difference on stage. There's also the unspoken regional symbolism. By repeatedly choosing Thailand, BTS indirectly acknowledges Southeast Asia as more than a secondary market. They turn Bangkok into a stand-in for millions of fans who know their own countries might never get a date. That's powerful, but also complicated. Because while Thai concerts feel inclusive, they also quietly reinforce a hierarchy within the region. Thailand becomes the chosen point, and others orbit around it. At this point, I find myself torn. On one hand, it makes perfect sense. Thailand delivers numbers, noise, and loyalty. On the other hand, it exposes how calculated a world tour really is. BTS's return to Thailand in their latest Asia itinerary confirms what many fans already feel, but rarely say out loud. Some countries are anchors, not experiments. Thailand is safe, proven, emotionally rewarding, and commercially efficient. And whether fans like it or not, those qualities make it hard to replace. From my perspective, Thailand isn't just a stop on the map. It's a pressure valve, a regional heartbeat, and a reminder that even global phenomena like BTS still rely on specific places to recharge their momentum. Number 6, Brazil. Brazil is one of those countries that, whenever it appears on a BTS world tour list, makes me stop and nod slowly, as if to say, yes, of course it's there. Because Brazil doesn't just have a large fan base in South America, it has something more volatile and harder to manufacture: emotional intensity. Sao Paulo, in particular, has become almost synonymous with BTS's presence in the region, and its inclusion again in the 2026-2027 tour cycle only reinforces a pattern that's been forming for years. On paper, Brazil makes sense. Huge population, massive online engagement, consistently trending hashtags, and crowds that sell out venues at a frightening speed. But if it were only about statistics, there would be more variety across South America. What keeps pulling BTS back to Brazil, in my view, is the sheer force of how Brazilian fans express devotion. Concert footage from Sao Paulo doesn't look like a regular show. It looks like an emotional eruption. Fans scream lyrics back at the stage with such volume that the artists themselves often pause, visibly stunned. And that kind of reaction matters. Artists remember how a place makes them feel, not just how many tickets were sold. What's rarely talked about is how Brazil functions as a symbolic representative for an entire continent. When BTS goes to Sao Paulo, they're not just visiting Brazil, they're acknowledging South America as a whole, even if indirectly. Fans travel across borders, carrying flags, accents, and stories that collapse into one overwhelming crowd. From a strategic perspective, it's efficient. One city, one country, massive regional impact. But emotionally, it's a double-edged sword, because while Brazil feels seen, other countries remain in a perpetual state of waiting. Personally, I find Brazil's role fascinating because it exposes how much of a world tour is built on emotional feedback loops. BTS gives energy, Brazil multiplies it and throws it back tenfold. That exchange becomes addictive. It creates a sense of safety. If you go there, you know the response will be explosive, validating, unforgettable. And in an industry where global relevance must constantly be reaffirmed, that kind of certainty is priceless. So when I see Brazil listed again, I don't see just another stop. I see a calculated return to a place that guarantees emotional payoff. Brazil isn't chosen because it's convenient, it's chosen because it's overwhelming. And once an artist experiences that level of collective passion, walking away from it becomes almost impossible. Number 5, United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, especially London, occupies a very particular space in BTS's touring history, and the more I observe it, the more it feels symbolic rather than purely practical. London is not just another European stop, it functions as a cultural checkpoint. When BTS chooses the UK, it feels like a statement that goes beyond ticket sales. Historically, London has been a gatekeeper city for global music legitimacy. Countless artists are measured by whether they can fill arenas or stadiums there. And BTS stepping into that space repeatedly sends a quiet but firm message. They belong in the same global conversation. What's interesting is the long gap before their return to Europe, and when they finally came back in 2026, the UK was again part of that comeback narrative. That tells me this country is not treated as optional, it's a reset button. From an industry perspective, the UK offers prestige, influential media, and a music press that still shapes international perception. But if I'm being honest, I don't think BTS goes to London just for headlines. UK crowds have a very specific energy. They're not always the loudest, but they're attentive, focused, and emotionally restrained in a way that creates tension in the room. And tension, strangely enough, can be powerful. It forces performers to be precise, present, and fully engaged. Personally, I think BTS thrives on that challenge. London audiences don't explode immediately. They warm up slowly, then lock in. That kind of response feels different from the instant emotional rush of other regions. And then there's Europe as a whole. By anchoring their European presence in the UK, BTS simplifies a complex continent into a single focal point. Fans travel from France, Germany, Spain, even Eastern Europe, turning one UK show into a continental gathering. On the surface, it looks inclusive, but when I think deeper, it also reveals how selective global touring really is. Choosing the UK repeatedly means other European countries remain peripheral peripheral, watching from the sidelines. At this point, I personally feel conflicted. I admire the confidence of returning to a city that represents scrutiny and legacy, but I also sense how calculated it is. The UK gives BTS validation in the language the Western industry still respects most. It's not just about singing to fans, it's about being seen, reviewed, archived, and remembered. In my view, the United Kingdom is where BTS doesn't just perform, they reaffirm their global status. And that's why, no matter how long the hiatus, London keeps finding its way back onto the map. Number 4, Mexico. Mexico has always felt like one of those countries BTS doesn't just visit, but intentionally returns to. And the more I observe their touring patterns, the clearer this becomes. Mexico City, in particular, stands out as a pressure point of emotion in Latin America. This is not a casual stop added to fill a gap between North and South America. Mexico is a statement. What many people underestimate is how deeply rooted concert culture is there. Mexican fans don't treat concerts as entertainment, they treat them as collective release. When BTS steps onto a stage in Mexico City, the noise is not polite, it's overwhelming, almost confrontational in its intensity. And personally, I believe that kind of response leaves a mark on performers. From a strategic angle, Mexico makes perfect sense. It bridges markets. It connects the US tour circuit with Latin America, both geographically and culturally. But reducing Mexico to logistics alone feels dishonest. There's a reason BTS keeps coming back. Mexican armies are known for their endurance, their willingness to wait for hours, sometimes days, their ability to turn airports, hotels, and public spaces into spontaneous fan zones. That kind of devotion creates an atmosphere that goes beyond ticket sales. It creates memory, and memory is currency in the touring world. What's rarely discussed is how Mexico also acts as a voice for an entire region that historically felt overlooked by global pop industries. Every time BTS confirms Mexico City, it sends a message to Latin America. You matter enough to be a priority, not a bonus. At the same time, I can't ignore the double edge of this choice. While Mexico's inclusion feels validating, it also centralizes attention. Other Latin American countries end up orbiting Mexico, traveling long distances, spending more, adjusting their expectations. In that sense, Mexico becomes both a gift and a filter. From my perspective, BTS's consistent choice of Mexico reveals how emotionally intelligent their touring strategy is. They know where energy multiplies. They know where passion spills over into global headlines, viral videos, and unforgettable crowd reactions, and they lean into it. Mexico offers chaos, loyalty, and a kind of emotional honesty that's hard to manufacture elsewhere. Personally, I don't see Mexico as just a Latin American stop. I see it as an emotional amplifier, a place where BTS can feel the sheer scale of their impact in human voices, not charts or numbers. And once an artist experiences that level of response, walking away from it becomes almost impossible. Number 3, United States. The United States is not just a stop on BTS's world tour map, it's a proving ground. And honestly, this is where everything feels the most calculated. Every major BTS tour without the US would feel incomplete, almost invalid in the eyes of the global music industry. Cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and even places like Tampa are chosen not randomly, but because they represent different layers of America's music ecosystem. What people often overlook is that the US isn't just about ticket sales, it's about legitimacy. Performing in massive American stadiums sends a message far beyond the audience inside the venue. It tells labels, award bodies, radio stations, and media gatekeepers that BTS is not a guest in the Western industry, but a force operating at the same level as domestic superstars. From my personal perspective, this is where BTS's world tour strategy feels the coldest, but also the smartest. The American market is ruthless. Fans are passionate, yes, but the industry itself is unforgiving. Charts, streaming numbers, press coverage, and awards all intersect here. BTS returning again and again to the US feels less like nostalgia and more like maintenance of power. There's also a psychological layer that fascinates me. American concerts often feel more restrained compared to Latin America or Southeast Asia, yet they carry immense symbolic weight. The crowd may scream, but the real audience is often invisible. Executives, journalists, and institutions watching from afar. And this is where I sometimes feel conflicted. On one hand, I admire how BTS navigates this environment, turning a system that once marginalized non-English artists into a stage they dominate. On the other hand, it exposes how unequal the global music hierarchy still is. Why does success still need American validation? Why does a world tour feel incomplete without US dates, even when global demand is exploding elsewhere? These questions linger every time BTS announces multiple American stops. Yet, reality is hard to ignore. The US amplifies everything. One sold-out stadium here echoes louder than several shows elsewhere combined. In my opinion, BTS understands this better than anyone. Their presence in the United States is not about chasing approval anymore, but about controlling the narrative. They don't go there to ask for space, they go there to occupy it. And that's exactly why the US remains non-negotiable in any major BTS world tour. Not because it's the loudest, but because it's the most influential battleground they've learned to master. Number 2, Japan. Japan is not just a recurring destination for BTS. It feels more like a second home that exists parallel to their identity as a Korean group. And honestly, this is where the idea of a world tour starts to blur for me. Tokyo Dome alone carries a symbolic weight that goes far beyond capacity numbers. It's a venue that historically represents legitimacy, endurance, and long-term acceptance in one of the most demanding music markets in the world. BTS didn't just arrive there and get embraced overnight. Their relationship with Japan was built slowly, sometimes painfully, through years of Japanese releases, promotions, language adaptation, and relentless touring. And that's why Japan keeps coming back into the itinerary, almost automatically. From a business perspective, the reasons are obvious. Japan has one of the largest physical album markets left in the world, insanely loyal consumers, and fans who are willing to follow an artist for years without losing interest. But if I'm being honest, reducing Japan to just a big market feels like an oversimplification that misses the emotional gravity of it all. What people rarely talk about is how disciplined and respectful Japanese audiences are, and how that creates a very specific kind of performance atmosphere. The chants are synchronized, the light sticks move like a single organism, and the attention feels focused, almost sacred. I personally believe that kind of audience changes how an artist performs. It forces precision, it demands control, and BTS, a group that thrives on detail and emotional delivery, fits unnervingly well into that environment. At the same time, this is where my feelings get complicated. Japan's constant presence in BTS's tours also exposes a quiet imbalance, because while Japan is always included, many other Asian countries with equally passionate fans remain optional, uncertain, or entirely absent. Japan feels guaranteed, locked in, immune to rotation, and that tells me something uncomfortable about how the industry prioritizes stability over expansion. BTS returning to Tokyo again in their latest tour dates confirms what has long been obvious to observers. Japan is not treated as a risk, but as a foundation. It's where expectations are predictable, revenue is secure, and reception is almost mathematically reliable. Part of me understands and even respects that, but another part of me can't help questioning whether this reliability has turned Japan into a comfort zone. Because when an artist always knows they will be welcomed, applauded, and financially rewarded, there's less urgency to challenge the map. Still, I can't deny the emotional truth. Japan has witnessed BTS grow from outsiders to stadium-level icons, and that shared history carries weight. Every return feels like a confirmation, not of hype, but of permanence. And maybe that's why Japan will always remain a priority, not because BTS needs Japan, but because Japan represents proof that they've already won a battle that many artists never survive. Number 1. South Korea. South Korea is not just the starting point of BTS's world tours, it is the emotional and symbolic center that everything else orbits around. And in my personal view, this will never change, no matter how global BTS becomes. Every time a world tour is announced, I already assume South Korea will either open it, close it, or do both. And honestly, I'd be more shocked if it didn't. Cities like Goyang and Busan are not random choices, they are deliberate statements. Opening a tour in South Korea feels like a grounding ritual, a reminder of origin, discipline, and identity before stepping onto the global stage. Closing a tour there, on the other hand, feels like a full circle moment, almost ceremonial, as if the journey only truly ends once it returns home. What people rarely talk about is the psychological weight of that decision. Performing first or last in South Korea is not just for the fans, it's for BTS themselves. This is where expectations are highest, scrutiny is sharpest, and emotional stakes are at their peak. In Korea, they are not just global superstars, they are national figures, cultural symbols, and industry benchmarks. Personally, I think this is why South Korea is non-negotiable. No amount of overseas success can replace the validation, pressure, and meaning of performing at home. There's also a deeper layer here that makes me uneasy and fascinated at the same time. South Korea is where BTS is judged most harshly, but also loved most intimately. The cheers there are different. They carry pride, ownership, and history. When BTS stands on a Korean stage, especially at the end of a long world tour, it feels less like a concert and more like a reckoning with everything they've become. And yes, from a strategic standpoint, ending a tour at home maximizes media impact, national headlines, and cultural legacy. But reducing it to strategy feels dishonest. I believe there's an emotional necessity at play. After months of being consumed by global expectations, returning to South Korea is a way for BTS to recalibrate who they are beyond charts and numbers. That's why locations like Goyang and Busan matter. They are large enough to handle the scale, but intimate enough to feel personal. In my eyes, South Korea is not just a priority country, it is the emotional spine of every BTS world tour. Remove it, and the tour might still function, but it would lose its soul.